Hey guys, so today I want to show you how to make a synthesizer sound in the style of Stranger Things, and this is what it sounds like. Check it out. Yeah, so basically this is using all stock plugins within Ableton, and if you want to just pick up the preset of the instrument rack, you can find that in the link in the description below if you want to access the free access club. So basically the sound is using an arpeggiator function, using the style converge, has a straight groove, 16th notes, a little bit of distance added, which creates a wider pitch of the notes that are represented on the screen. Really all I'm playing is a C minor chord right on the middle of the keyboard on C3. But this gives it a lot more tones to work with. And the converge style is basically just bouncing from the lowest note to the highest note, to the second lowest note, to the second highest note, all the way till it gets to the middle. And it creates a really interesting pattern. But that's basically it. There's a little bit of offset there as well to create a little more interest in the arpeggiating pattern. And then the sound is coming from analog, which is the basic subtractive synthesizer that Ableton provides. And it's a great tool. Basically, I have a sine wave and a square wave. There's obviously some detuning going on. And these oscillators definitely have a little bit of pitch envelope happening. There's no pitch envelope happening in the square wave. But a big part of the sound is coming from the filters. And the routing of this, you want to make sure to be set to this one, which is basically just sending each oscillator to its own filter, but they also get sent to the same amplifier envelope right here. So the filter for the first oscillator, the sine wave, is a low pass, set to about 791 or like 800 thereabouts. No resonance. And then the square wave is set to a notch point filter, and it's at 1.1K. And that gives it kind of a different sound. And then you have the amplifier envelope, and these are the ADSR settings. And then a big part of what makes this sound what it is the LFOs. We have two LFOs. This one is synced to 16th notes, and it's a sine wave. And basically that sine wave is getting sent to the pitch modulation on the first oscillator. So what that's doing is it's creating a lot more warble. And even though it's very little, it's only 0.03, it's creating that warble effect. In fact, if I was to like really ramp it up, you'd really hear it get crazy. So you obviously don't need a lot of it for it to make the sound pretty sci-fi. But this just gives it that warble kind of sound. And then the second LFO is a triangle wave. Regular width, 50%, the default setting they give you. And that's basically just being sent to the amp envelope because you have the pan modulation feature here. And this is going to create a far more stereo-like effect to your sound because it's making the sound of the arpeggiator bounce off of the speakers. And just in general, using the LFO2 setting on your synthesizer sounds to create more of a stereo widening effect is really useful. And just panning your sound is really good for that. And then the last thing is we're adding some vibrato, unison, glissando, just to give it more weight and more movement and more interest. And then we go to basically the plugins that come after the synthesizer sound. So these effect plugins are basically doing a very simple thing, which is they're taking off the lower frequencies. So I'm just rolling off right here around 100 hertz to make sure that we don't have a really muddy sound. And then we have a filter delay. And the filter delay is really interesting because people don't usually use it, but it's great for adding a little bedrock of sound. It sort of, because it's not really focused on the higher frequencies, at least in these settings, it creates a much darker sort of delay below the arpeggiator. And because the arpeggiator is pretty fast, it creates sort of this ambient layer to it. It's almost sort of like a reverb in the way it sort of affects the sound. And it just is going to make the sound a lot more ambient, basically. Then we're going into a saturator. So this is just adding, much more kind of aggression to the sound and sort of unifying everything that happened before it. And then that's actually going into a really overlooked plugin, which is the cabinet plugin in Ableton. And it's a 4x12 speaker, and it's off-axis condenser. And you got to make sure that you set this to dual output, not mono, because it's very easy to use the cabinet plugin and other plugins that are set by default to mono. So the whole point of the sound is that it's stereo. So this way you're back into a stereo setting. And then I just sort of dialed it in with the dry wet knob. And then I added the vinyl distortion, not a lot though. At 0.27, it's just adding this top little crackle to the sound. And that's where you get a lot of that lo-fi aesthetic. It's sort of by creating like an illusion of a clipping. It's not really digitally clipping, but it has this sort of hotness to it because we're adding that extra drive, that extra crackle right on top of the highest transients. And that's really important to the sound. And then I added one more EQ, and again, it's just taking off low-end frequencies. So all the processing that happened back here, I'm basically cleaning it up before I go to my reverb. And then this is the reverb. And it looks complicated, but really all it is an audio effect rack, which basically lets you split your signal into multiple copies so you can parallel process them as you want. So the first chain I created, you just right-click and hit Create Chain. And the first chain here has absolutely nothing on it, so it's just the regular sound coming out. But the second chain has an EQ8, which is rolling off quite a lot of the low end and the mid-range low end frequencies, so it's at 335. And I'm doing that because I'm sending this to a very small, small reverb sound. And that reverb sound can get really overwhelmed by the low end frequencies, especially because the arpeggiator is so busy, right? It's a 16th note arpeggiator. There's a lot of notes happening. There's a lot of texture, a lot of characteristic to it. So you don't want to overwhelm your reverb sound. So a great way to do this is to put in your reverb in a parallel way, and what you're sending to that reverb are sort of the higher frequencies. None of the sub or the low bass frequencies are there. And that makes the reverb a lot cleaner sounding, and then you can just dial in the amount that you like. And I stick to a shorter reverb because I find with a long reverb tail, like a big cathedral sound or something like that, it tends to have such a long tail that, it kind of just gets droned out and doesn't really add much definition. It just sort of kind of covers up everything. So yeah, that's the whole sound. Again, if you just want to pick up the preset and try out the sound for your own productions, you can get it totally for free. I have a free access club. A link's in the description. You can sign up for the newsletter and get it sent to you over Google Drive. But yeah, if you like this video and you got something out of it, please make sure to hit that like button, subscribe for notifications, and you can check out my videos in the future. Tons of different tutorials of making interesting sound design for your own music. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Thanks for watching. Have fun making music.